Hello there, this is Debbie Heiser, and I am so stinking excited to share this new season 4 with you. And I can't believe that this is already the 4th season of Lead Your Life with Debbie Heiser. And I just want to thank each of you who listen. And my hope is that the tools, the thoughts and experiences I share, as well as the work I've done to love myself, love others, and love the work I'm called to do, that also helps me lead a truly lit up life, will help you move into a more lit up life yourself. A few things to look for in this season. Super excited to share that we're going to be coming to you now every week with episodes jam-packed with information to serve you. Every other week, you'll hear from a guest who's leading a life that they love, and I'll be asking them to share their stories, how they got there, and any thoughts or advice that they can give you, our loyal listeners. We have new music too, and I'm so thrilled to introduce this song called Ride, sung and co-written by my friend, Miss Jackie Wilson. And she, along with her collaborators, Tyler Banks, David DJ Lee, and Chris Renee, are super talented and generous, as this song fits perfectly into the thought of stepping into your best life. To follow any or all of these talented folks, check out the show notes for their social handles. Thanks again for listening. Enjoy season 4 and do us a solid and leave us a rating and a comment to help us be able to share more with people across the globe. Now, let's get started with this episode. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Lead Your Life with Debbie Heiser. I am excited. I am kicking off a series about the universal laws. And I choose to live these laws. It helps me step back and look at things objectively and realize that just like the law of gravity, there are certain things that happen because it's the law. And so I want to talk today about the law of perpetual transmutation of energy. And for those of you that don't know me, my name is Debbie Heiser. I help entrepreneurs make a lot of money doing what they love without sacrificing what's important to them. I see a lot of business owners really sacrificing their life to run their business versus them running their business to then have the life that they choose. So a lot of ways that I do this is by studying and talking about the universal laws. This law, the law of perpetual transmutation of energy, sometimes gets a little confusing for people. And so I want to clear up the confusion, talk about what it is, talk about some of the subsidiary laws that feed into this and how that applies into real life. And if you own a business or are working in corporate or for someone, the same holds true. So let's talk. So I'm sorry, I got a frog in my throat. The law of perpetual transmutation of energy basically says that substance can be transformed, it can be transmuted, but it never can be destroyed. And if you think about water, this is a really good example that it is a substance. So it has many forms, right? It can be frozen, so we call that ice. It can be thawed, and that is water. And it can also take on the form of air, which is mist or fog or any of these other labels that we have put to it, clouds. And then it turns around and rains again and is turned back into water, which then can be turned into other things. So that is the example of how a substance can change, but it can never be destroyed. Now, some of you might say, well, there are things that get destroyed, and but there is this cycle that happens. So if you think about a tree, even the same way, a seed is planted that came from another tree, and in some cases developed by humans, which I think that's where sometimes things do get destroyed, I guess, in a little bit, because we as humans continue to go in and change things against the law of nature. So what happens is a tree seed is planted, sometimes by the wind, by a bird, whatever. It grows into a tree. That tree is wood. That tree dies, falls down, becomes sawdust becomes, a tree kind of disintegrates into the earth that creates then this area for a seed to then take root again. So it's this cycle, right? And then this substance, what it says is substance is constantly going from a formless state to a physical state and back again. So when it comes to us as people, when we have an idea, that's the formless state. And this idea then, when it drops in as a true desire for us, if we create something, then that becomes a physical state. So as an example, I had an idea drop in that I wanted to do women's workshops. I developed a 3-day workshop. I went out and asked people, the law of vibration. So there's other laws that go in here. I went out and marketed it. It had a form to it. It became a reality. Women showed up to it. Great things happened after it. And that's an example of then where it went into a physical state. Then it created another idea that I'm getting ready to launch at the first of the year, to have a mastermind, cohort mastermind group that you'll hear more about. So keep an eye out for that. But that's another example then of where a cycle comes and gives me another idea. Now, because I've practiced this and practice this understanding of what is a true desire and what is maybe something fleeting or the next shiny object, and understanding what's really dropping in for me, then that makes it that much faster. I can quantum leap into that next idea and move into that and create the physical state from that. Now, a big piece of this, so if you think about this, Raymond Hollywell says, all the supply there ever was, still is, and ever shall be is here, for nothing can be wasted or lost. There can never be a shortage of supply. And I don't know how many of you have felt this way, but when I have opened myself up to receive, that's a big piece of what I see people do. They cut themselves off from receiving, so therefore it never comes. But when I'm open to receiving, and for me, God or source or universe provides and gives me the supply. At one point in time, I was talking to a friend of mine and I was like, holy cow, it's like the fire hose is at me. Now, it's a good thing. And it helped me level up, create systems, do the things to then serve in the way that I am needing to serve other people. And so the supply is out there. This refers to money. This refers to time. You've talked or you've heard. And if you haven't, go back to a past recording that I did around expanding time. And really looking at here that there's never a shortage of the supply. We just have to be open to receiving it and take action, right? It's not magic. It just doesn't happen. We have to take action around it too. But we have to be open to receiving and taking action. So what happens here is there are 3 areas within this that help us understand what this perpetual transmutation of energy is. And one is the law of thinking. And when we think about thought, thought is not necessarily visible, it's invisible. And it's the mechanism of creation and the source of all the conditions in our lives. When we think, we either think in a creative way or we think in a destructive way. That's the law of polarity. And whether it's constructive or deconstructive or destructive, we create. There is no exceptions, and our minds are a switching station for creation, because the law of perpetual transmutation of energy states that nothing can be destroyed. It's constantly going from a formless state to a physical state and back again, which is the progressive creative operation of the universe. So the law of thinking, something comes into our minds and we sometimes overanalyze it, or we'll overthink something, or we'll do things that muddy up the waters for us in our thinking process. But our thought process, our minds are really a switching station for creation. Like we're constantly creating. People in my life have said to me before, do you ever shut your brain off? And there are times I shut it off, but my mind is constantly thinking. It's constantly coming up with things unless I'm in a meditative state and it's still thinking. My subconscious is still thinking. So it's important to trust our thoughts And we have to practice trusting our thoughts, because it's also then, and I teach this in the foresight and strategy class that I teach at Gonzaga, about integrating your head and your heart, your body, and your intuition. And all four of those are important. Now, the law of the heart says whatever we think about, we hold in our heart, our subconscious then materializes. So this is where, when you've heard me talk about before, get really clear on what you want, not what you don't want, because if I said, don't think of a yellow elephant, you're automatically thinking of a yellow elephant. If I say, think about what you want, we tend to, because culturally we've been taught to look for the bad, we look for them what we don't want to try to describe what we do want. So take a minute, pause the recording. What do you want? Think about that question. Answer that question. If you start finding yourself saying, well, I don't want this in a relationship, or I don't want this in my business, stop yourself and think about what the opposite of that is. What do you want? Because when we put into our minds and into our hearts, it goes into our subconscious mind. And even though we say the word don't, we don't hear the word don't. So when I say don't think of a yellow elephant, you automatically think of a yellow elephant. The don't gets taken away. So do yourself a favor and think about what you do want. Switch that around. And you can use categories in your life. You can just say, as my life, here's what I want. And when you say lead a lit up life, don't describe that, because that doesn't have an emotional hook other than I want to be happy. I want to do these things. I have to get really specific on what leading a lit up life looks like and what I want my life to look like being lit up. So if you think about it, even biblical, King Solomon says, as a person thinketh in their heart, so are they. What we think of in our heart is how we show up in the world. And sometimes there's a lot of healing that has to happen in our heart as well. So the law of heart talks about whatever we hold in our heart, in our minds and in our hearts, our subconscious mind materializes that. So be conscious of what you're thinking and what is truly in your heart. Sometimes people say, oh, I'm self-sabotaging. I don't like that word, self-sabotage. I think there's a lot of guilt and shame put into that. We're smart people. If we knew what was stopping us, we would choose something different. So the choice here is to really dig in and figure out, what am I thinking? Because we are first cause. What am I thinking? What's in my heart? What is my true desire? And I've talked about loyalty pacts, and like these loyalty pacts are contracts we have with people, whether that be our parents or, a culture that we've grown up with, a tribe that we've grown up in, or these double binds where we say we want something, but then truly in our heart, there's some fear of losing something. And so we pull ourselves back down into this. Okay, so the law of thinking, the law of the heart. Then if you think about the law of more life, this is this idea of the fact that we are born with a spiritual seed or a DNA that has as its directive to grow and become the fullest expression of itself. When we came into this earth, God or the universe has a purpose for us. And what happens is then we start comparing with other people. And you've heard me say this before, people that are stay-at-home mothers, they're just a stay-at-home mom, drives me crazy. I tell them to stop that, because we each have this DNA that impacts the world. My mentor, Dr. John Horsman, you've heard me talk of him before, once said to me, I said, if you ask me to feed a child, I tend to creep out into this huge scope and I try to solve world hunger. And he said to me one time, he said, isn't feeding one child solving world hunger? Changed my entire perspective, because in order to step in and be the full expression of myself, there were people that had to feed me in different ways, not just necessarily physical, although that was there too. And so even if I'm impacting one life, that life can have this huge ripple effect that we don't even fathom or even know about. And so it's not about the quantity, it's about stepping into the fullest expression of who you are and stepping into that with full faith, knowing who you are, what you're made to do in this world. And so part of what the law of more life is talking about is that to become the full expression of yourself, it's about understanding those desires, what it is that you want, because God puts desires on our heart. And I have spent a lot of time in confusion and going, is this really God? Is this me? And blah, 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 blah. Because we are trained up in religion, in our cultures, in our families, not to desire something, that desiring something is selfish, when in fact, God puts desires on our heart. So it's like this lie that we've heard almost. And so desire for more is God's way of calling us forward, or the universe, whatever word you want to use, the way of calling us forward into actualizing what our purpose is, what we're meant to do in this world, what we're meant to be, even more importantly. And so Andrew Carnegie has a philosophy, and he says, any idea that's held in the mind, that's emphasized, whether feared or revered, will begin at once to clothe itself in the most convenient and appropriate form available. Like, we will see it. We'll start to see a way to do this. I just had this experience happen this last week. I had a friend of mine ask me, when are you going to start this cohort mastermind that you've been talking about? I'm like, oh, and I went into my time stories. Oh, well, I was going to do it the 1st of 2023, but then I've had a little wobble because I had some people that were, excuse me, were on my team that had to leave for personal reasons. And so I've been reorganizing team. And so probably 3 months later than what I thought. Then I stepped back and I looked at her and I go, what am I doing? And I came back the next morning and I said, okay, I've had this idea for a while. I just need to go implement it. So guess what? The short answer to your question is I'm going to start it in January of 2023. And so it's about moving in to becoming a quicker decider about things, because the energy is there, the substance is there, and you just have to step into it in faith. So the other piece of this is recognizing your body tells you things. I love Louise Hay, Hayes, if you're looking for her. I don't think there's an S on the end, actually. And she wrote a book called The Body Can Heal Itself. I've talked about this before, but what she talks about is kind of what Oprah has issued this, or coined this phrase of, the issues are in your tissues. And we hold emotion in our physical body. We hold a knowing in our body. Like, you've all had it where you've been somewhere and the hair stands up on the back of your neck, or you have this like hit that you need to do something, like physically do something different than what you've done. There's reasons for that, and you're listening to your body. Like, for instance, when I was the CFO for a small company, there was some financial struggle because we were in the medical field. And every month, at the end of the month, when I had to go reconcile the checkbook, reconcile the credit cards, and pay bills, my lower back hurt and I couldn't figure it out. I looked it up in Louise Hay, and it's money fears. I've had times where I've hiked and my feet have felt like cement blocks. They've hurt. I couldn't figure it out. I looked it up in the book or online, and it's fear of moving forward. Like, what was I being asked to step into that I was afraid of? And so some of you are going to go, ooh, that's a little woo-woo for me, but it's true. And when I look at those things, then it's about reprogramming my brain to say, I'm not afraid to move forward. If the universe is for me, if God is for me, then I'm okay moving forward. Or that when I think about the law of perpetual transmutation of energy and how it's all here, and it's all here right now, it's never going to run out. Supply is never going to run out. Then it helps me ease up and look at, then I'm first cause. So what do I need to do to generate some revenue? That's how those laws work. There's some subtleties in some of this, but I wanted to start out. This one's a little tougher one, but I wanted to start out with this one because it really is about realizing, that there's nothing new under the universe. It's just hasn't taken form in substance, or it hasn't like formed in its substance yet. And so if you have an idea, you have something hit you, whether it's in your heart, whether it's in your head, whether it's in your body, or listening to your intuition, go for it. Step into it. It's amazing when you do what happens. So notice the fears. What are you afraid of? And sometimes we have to get more uncomfortable sitting in the fear before we'll step forward. If you'd like to talk a little bit more about how to step forward, how to identify what some of your core wounds and what some of the core fears that you have are that might be holding you back, please, please, please go out to my website. I am at www.leadyourlituplife.com and set up a clarity call with me. It's free. It's 30 minutes. And I promise you, you will be clearer at the end of that 30 minutes than you were when you started the call. And no pressure to work with me or anything. It's just more of like helping you get clear. And with that, it's a wrap. I hope this made sense to you. If not, feel free to look it up online, or there's a book that I use called Working with the Law that's phenomenal and goes into these a little bit more in depth. And stay tuned for the next one that we'll talk about next week. You're going to get 2 recordings of me in a row, and then we'll go back to our interviews. So with that, it's a wrap. Everybody have a fantastic day. And remember, the supply is all there. Just listen to your head, your heart, your body, and your intuition. With that, take care. Find your own kind of happiness.